Welcome to the channel Histories Forever, and we invite you to watch our new original story. Natasha emerged from the notary's office feeling uplifted. She had just signed the documents accepting her inheritance. For her, this event was more than a stroke of luck. It was the unexpected revelation that someone in this world remembered her. Along with the paperwork, the notary handed her a sealed envelope. "The benefactor instructed me to give you this letter, only if you accepted the inheritance," the notary said, then added thoughtfully, "From my experience, the most crucial information is often hidden in such messages. I wish you good luck and caution. Inheritance can be a dangerous thing. People might descend upon it like locusts, eager to claim their share." "That won't happen to me," Natasha responded confidently. "I'm an orphan with no relatives." Even more reason to be cautious. Property by the sea is a prize for all sorts of schemers, and without family, you'll have no one to protect you. Though sometimes relatives can be worse than a flock of vultures. In any case, good luck. Natalia passed the notary's secretary, who, the moment Natasha entered the reception area, began making a call. "Yes, she's leaving now, be ready," the girl overheard, but paid no mind. 10 years prior, Natalia Pavlova had left the orphanage, a place that, despite the years spent within its walls, had never felt like home. She didn't remember her parents and, unlike many children from orphanages, had no desire to find them. During that time, a woman who introduced herself as her aunt visited a few times, promising to take the girl with her, but then she too disappeared. Very early on, Natasha understood that she was alone in this world and could only rely on herself. She didn't even have close friends. The so-called orphanage camaraderie hadn't broken her spirit. Natasha lived life on her own terms, crafting her destiny in her imagination. After 9th grade, instead of being transferred to a vocational college, where most of the pupils learned to be seamstresses or shoemakers, she remained at the school. Her sharp intellect and diligent work allowed Natasha to become one of the top students, giving her the opportunity to pursue higher education. After school, fate, which had been harsh for so long, finally decided to smile upon the young woman. Firstly, she successfully passed her exams and was admitted to the prestigious Information Systems and Technology program. Secondly, upon reaching adulthood, she received her legally entitled state-provided housing, a perfectly habitable small one-bedroom apartment in a Khrushchev-era building. By the time Natasha was informed about the inheritance, she'd already graduated from university and become a successful and promising manager at a large company specializing in software development for industrial facilities. It was around this time that her first close friend, Yulia, appeared in her life, someone with whom she could share her heart or simply sit in comfortable silence, feeling understood and supported. Natasha took out her phone and called Yulia. "Come over immediately after work today. We're going to celebrate," she announced joyfully. "Celebrate what? It's not like we've received any bonuses. Your birthday is 3 months away and New Year's is already behind us." "You'll find out when you get here," Natalia replied mysteriously. "We'll have a pajama party. Tomorrow's a day off. We can relax." So engrossed was Natasha in the conversation that she bumped into a young man holding a paper cup of coffee. Ugly stains immediately decorated his light jacket. The girl began apologizing, quickly pulled out napkins and tried to salvage the situation. The man smiled. "It's my fault. I was gazing at you. Stains on clothes aren't stains on reputation. They're easy to get rid of. My name is Timur, by the way. And yours?" "Natasha," the flustered girl replied. "Perhaps we could continue our acquaintance this evening, given that the universe has so unexpectedly brought us together in one place and time. Do you believe in signs from above?" Natasha glanced at her interlocutor again. The man was very attractive. His tanned face had well-defined features. Large, childlike gray eyes held a silent question and hope. A faint smile played on his lips. "Why not?" she thought, and replied, "I can't today. I already have a planned meeting. Perhaps another time." "All right," Timur agreed immediately. "Let's meet tomorrow at the park for the farewell to winter festivities. We can go and have some fun." They exchanged phone numbers and agreed to meet by the main gates. Just 5 minutes later, Natasha regretted her decision. How could she have given her phone number to the first person she met? Her mind screamed about her carelessness, while her heart fluttered with anticipation of something new and wonderful. "So, what's up with you?" Yulia asked without preamble as soon as she stepped into the tiny hallway of Natasha's apartment. "You've been acting so mysterious all week, as if you've won $1 million and are deciding how to spend it with pleasure." "You've almost guessed," Natasha replied. "Just aim higher. I've received an inheritance." Natasha froze. "You're quite the secret keeper," she exclaimed. "How long has it been since you found out until today?" "Almost a month, but I didn't believe it myself. I kept thinking it was some kind of mistake, so I didn't tell anyone." "Come on, don't just stand there like a post. Come in, we're going to celebrate." Yulia found herself in a cozy kitchen where the table was laden with delicacies the friends rarely indulged in. Caviar tartlets, a platter of exotic fruits, assorted meats and cheeses, and a whole vase of chocolates. "Wow," Yulia exclaimed, "we're celebrating. So, what exactly did you receive?" "A house by the sea, right on the very blue Black Sea," Natasha replied with delight. Yulia sank into a chair from surprise. "And have you seen it in person?" "No, only in photographs. I'll show you now." For a while, the girls forgot all about the treats awaiting them on the table and began to examine the pictures. Of course, it wasn't a tycoon's mansion, but a decent cottage with a small yard and garden. "And who left it to you?" asked her friend. "My aunt on my father's side. I only saw her a few times as a child when she visited the orphanage. By the way, she gave me a letter, but I've been hesitant to open it. It's difficult at 27 to meet yourself. What if there are secrets that will be unpleasant for me? Maybe it's better to throw it away and leave things as they are. But then you'll torment yourself your whole life, thinking about what you did. You need to know the truth, if only for the sake of someone who thought of you before they died." Natasha opened the envelope and took out an ordinary notebook sheet. "Hello, my dear niece. I am very guilty towards you and your father for not keeping my promise and not taking you from the orphanage. I met a man, fell in love, and he set a condition: no children from orphanages. I prioritized my happiness over my own blood then, and I regretted it later, of course, but what's done is done. Now, about your parents. We don't speak ill of the dead, and there's nothing good to say about your mother. Your father was also no angel. He wanted a lot of money and, well, didn't survive in prison, but he remembered you, which is why he asked me to adopt you. I promised. Now I am ill, very ill, and by the time you receive this letter, I will no longer be in this world. Perhaps my gift will somehow lessen my sin, and it will be beneficial for you. Please light candles for us sinners in the church. There is no one else to remember us on this earth. Your aunt, Pavlova Zinaida Nikolaevna." For a few minutes, Natasha was silent. She tried to calm the storm of emotions that had risen within her heart. "I'll need to find out where she's buried and order a prayer at the church," she said. "All my life I thought I had no one, that no one even remembered me. But the reality is this. Can you come with me? We need to see the house and decide what to do with it." "Of course I'll come. Let's go during the upcoming long weekend. It seems we have them at the beginning of March, and now we really need to celebrate. Such luck doesn't come every day." As the wine was consumed, its pleasant warmth made the girls more inclined to personal conversation. Natasha said, "But that's not all the news. Today I met a nice young man, and he invited me on a date." "And where did you meet him?" Yulia inquired. Natasha told her friend about her collision with Timur, both literally and figuratively. "Maybe it really is fate?" she asked. "You know, when I think about him, I feel like smiling." "So you're already thinking about him?" Yulia repeated. "Then it's definitely fate." The next day for Natasha was like a fairy tale, a beautiful winter fairy tale. The sky was a true February azure, like in a painting. The premonition of spring was everywhere, in the snowflakes falling under the sun's rays, in the loud cries of crows, and in the special clarity of the air. Natasha spotted Timur from afar. He stood by the gates with a huge bouquet of newly arrived mimosas, carefully scanning faces, afraid to miss the girl in the crowd. When Natasha approached, he handed her the bouquet. "Do you like these flowers?" he asked, and Natasha laughed. "Did you mix up the roles?" Margarita asked that question. "But honestly, do you like them?" "Very much. I never understood people who give roses at this time. They'll be available in February, June, and October. But mimosas warm us with the first heat only at the end of winter, the beginning of spring, and they leave the city for a whole year." "So you like Bulgakov too?" Timur asked. "Then we won't have any trouble finding things to talk about." Afterwards, they strolled through the cheerful fair, ate hot, freshly baked pancakes, rode the carousels, and had fun like children. "Kati, how's the jacket? Were you able to get the stains out?" Natasha asked as they left the park, tired from an excess of joyful emotions. "No, or rather, I don't know. I decided to keep it as a talisman in memory of our acquaintance." The girl laughed. "Yes, I've never even heard of such talismans." Their relationship developed rapidly. Timur met Natasha almost every day after work, and they would go to cafes, cinemas, or simply stroll along boulevards and parks. "You look happy," Natasha said to Yulia one day, "and when will you introduce me to your chosen one?" "Anytime today," she replied. "We were just planning to have a Chinese dinner at my place. Order duck. Will you join us?" "Of course, and I'll bring the good wine." When Yulia arrived at her friend's place, Timur was already there. He smiled broadly and said, "I hope you'll be the maid of honor at our wedding and become the closest family friend." "Have we already talked about a wedding?" Natasha asked, surprised. "Did I miss something?" "We haven't. I was actually planning to propose today, and so that you couldn't refuse later, I now have a reliable witness." Timur took a ring from his pocket, got down on one knee, and asked, "Natasha, will you make me the happiest man for the rest of my life and marry me?" The girl blushed. She didn't want to offend Timur with a refusal, but agreeing to marriage after 3 weeks of knowing each other felt risky. "Let's postpone this conversation for a while. I'm not ready to make such a serious decision yet." Timur wasn't offended, although his whole demeanor showed he was disappointed. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm probably rushing things." The awkwardness of the situation didn't cast a shadow on the rest of the evening. The young couple drank wine and enjoyed a delicious Peking duck. Timur made plans for the upcoming spring holiday. "Perhaps we could go to a countryside resort. I'll invite Stas so Yulia won't be bored." "We have other plans for those days," Natasha replied. "I have some business in a small seaside town." "Business?" Timur asked. "Who does business during a holiday?" "Well, not exactly business." Natasha hesitated. "I need to look at a house." "Are you planning to buy a house by the sea?" Timur asked, surprised. "I didn't know you were a millionaire." "I'm not buying anything. I just need to go." She didn't go into details. "Well, perhaps I could join you?" he asked. "Don't be offended, but no. Yulia and I planned this trip even before we met, and believe me, we'll have a lot to do there." "All right," Timur agreed immediately, "but I'll miss you terribly." All evening, Yulia observed her friend's fiancé, who looked at Natasha with undisguised admiration, trying to anticipate her every wish. But the girl felt he was overacting, trying too hard to seem perfect. Although the sea was only 400 kilometers from the city where Natasha lived, spring had already fully arrived on the coast. In the flower beds of the private sector, where they headed by taxi, colorful primroses dotted the landscape. Yellow forsythia rivaled the bright spring sun. The sea shimmered under its rays. "I've never been to the sea at this time of year," Yulia said, "and the locals don't seem to notice this beauty." "We don't have time to admire the scenery. Everyone is preparing for the season now, which will feed them for the whole year." "And here's Lazurnaya 35, the driver said, stopping at a cottage. Natasha felt a thrill of anticipation. Could this little piece of paradise truly be hers? The girls opened the gate with keys and found themselves in a blooming courtyard. The house looked impressive, even larger than it appeared in the photographs. Natasha turned the key in the door but hesitated to open it for a long time. "Are you going to stand there? Or are we actually going inside?" Yulia asked. And Natasha cautiously crossed the threshold. The house was divided into two halves. On one side, along the corridor, were 4 isolated rooms with private bathrooms. On the other, a kitchen, a huge living room, and 2 bedrooms. "Wow," Yulia exclaimed with admiration. "Your aunt must have rented out rooms in the summer." The friends had barely unpacked their belongings when there was a knock at the door. An elderly woman stood on the threshold. "I'm Emma Dmitrievna, Zinochka's neighbor, and you must be Natashenka. She said she was leaving everything to her niece. Would you like me to show you everything and explain?" From the neighbor, Natasha learned that Zinaida Nikolaevna had lived in this house with her husband for the last 15 years. Kolya died during the pandemic, and Zinochka last summer from cancer. "She really wanted to see you, to confess to you. Well, perhaps fate wasn't on her side. She asked me to help you settle in, if you decide to live here or find reliable buyers so you don't get cheated if you want to sell. But I advise you not to rush. This is a good, profitable place, as not everyone wants to spend their vacation in noisy hotels. Some seek quiet courtyards." "So my aunt rented out rooms," Natasha clarified, managing to insert a word into Emma Dmitrievna's rapid speech. "Of course, we all live by that here." "And do you know where my aunt is buried?" Natasha asked. "Of course I know. I handled her funeral. Would you like me to go with you to the cemetery and show you the grave?" "Yes, I would love to." Tears welled up in the girl's eyes. She suddenly felt a pang of grief for her departed relative. The next day, they visited the cemetery. Natasha went into the chapel and lit candles. "I can hardly believe it. Is this really my house?" Natasha said as she, Yulia, and Emma Dmitrievna sat on the terrace, reminiscing about Zinaida Nikolaevna. "And we can come and relax by the sea any time now," she addressed her friend. "You're thinking about the wrong thing, girl," Yulia said. "You now have a reliable source of income for the rest of your life. The house is almost new. Zina did major renovations 2 years ago. The rooms are good, spacious. She has linens in the closets, so no further investment is needed." Natasha contemplated how drastically her life could change, but wasn't sure she was ready for it. The next 2 days, the friends enjoyed their vacation. They strolled along the embankment, sat on the deserted beach, and admired the sea's surface, clearing the yard after winter. "So, should I look for vacationers for you?" Emma Dmitrievna asked as she came out to see the girls off. "I don't know," Natasha replied. "It's too unexpected a gift. I don't even know how best to proceed." "Well, when you decide, call me," the neighbor said, handing her a phone number written on a piece of paper. "And I'll keep an eye on your house. I promised Zina I'd help you at first." Timur met the girls at the train station. "I've missed you so much," he whispered, hugging Natasha. Yulia watched the scene, feeling as though she was witnessing a poorly rehearsed theatrical performance. On the first workday back after the holiday, there was a buzz in the office. The director's secretary, Ninochka, spread the rumor that the company had won a tender and that the candidate to head the project was being discussed. She confided that there were only 5 contenders on the list, and both Yulia and Natasha were among them. By lunchtime, the tension reached its peak. Everyone wanted to hear the news firsthand. Finally, Ninochka announced over the intercom that the general director was gathering employees in the large conference room. Sergei Nikolaevich was in high spirits. "Colleagues," he began solemnly, "we have come a long way to this moment, and finally it has arrived. The tender is ours." Joyful applause erupted. "It is very important to meet the expectations of our client, the City Hall. You must understand the prospects that are opening up for the company. The board has selected 5 candidates who will participate in the competition for the new position. In 2 weeks, each of them must present their work plan." The male candidates, who had already formed an opposition towards Yulia and Natasha, looked at the girls with condescending smiles. "Girls, spring is just around the corner. You should be thinking about outfits, not serious projects," one of them remarked slyly as the employees left the conference room. "You can't count your chickens before they hatch," the feisty Yulia replied, not even deigning to look at the jokester. The office stood in anticipation. Perhaps only Natasha met the news with a degree of apathy. Her concerns were entirely different. Timur was becoming increasingly insistent and was rushing the wedding. But when she told him about her work situation, he supported his fiancée. "Let me handle all the chores and you focus on the project. Just imagine how proud I'll be to have such a successful wife." They filed their marriage application at the registry office and set a wedding date. When Natasha told Yulia this, her friend pondered. "Natasha, I don't want to offend you, but aren't you rushing things a bit? What do you know about him? Has he introduced you to his family? What's his background?" "Timur isn't hiding anything from me. He even warned me that he's been married twice but has no children. He lives with his mother, by the way, a very intelligent and pleasant woman. We had dinner at her place last week." "Married twice at 30? Yulia was surprised. "And that doesn't stop you? Doesn't it make you at least pause until you know each other better? Yulia, you'll never understand me. You lived with your parents, you had a home, a brother, relatives, while I felt only loneliness for a quarter of a century. Timur cares about me. He understands my problems. We're making plans together." "And where, for example, do you plan to live with his mother?" Yulia asked. "Timur has his own 2-bedroom apartment. He's just renting it out. For now, we'll live at my place. He's practically already moved in. And in August, his lease ends, and we'll move in with him." "Well, if that's the case, but be careful. Something about Timur's behavior is unsettling me," Yulia warned. "All right, I'll be more attentive. I'm sure you're mistaken." The conversation with her friend didn't plant a single seed of doubt in Natasha's mind. She reveled in the love and care of her future husband, who, during her work on the project, shielded her from all household chores. In the evenings, he would tell her about the wedding preparations, discuss the menu, and together they would compile a guest list. The celebration was planned to be intimate. On Natasha's side, there would only be Yulia and a few colleagues. Timur's side was expected to have more guests. "So, are you ready to fight for the position?" Timur asked on the eve of the project presentations. "I believe your proposals will be duly appreciated." "You know," Natasha replied, "even if someone else is chosen, I won't be too upset. The most important thing for me now is you and our relationship. Besides, there's still the matter of the inherited house. It will be necessary to determine what to do with him." Natalia did not notice Timur's face break into a pleased smile. His plan was supposed to work without much effort, and so the decisive day arrived. In the conference room, the friends sat next to each other and wished each other luck. The men kept to themselves, but all three looked condescendingly at the girls. Then Natalia and Yulia heard a voice behind them from one of the contenders. "Don't worry, Yurka. They were included in the competition for statistics. You don't think that Sergei Nikolaevich will entrust the department's management to a girl? The real competition will be between us, so get ready." "Did you hear that?" asked Yulia. "They're already dividing the spoils. We absolutely have to win. It doesn't matter whether it's you or me. The main thing is to put an end to this male chauvinism." Natasha nodded. "It's good that Timur isn't like that. He supports me and even took care of all the wedding arrangements himself." Yulia just smiled in response. She didn't want to argue with her friend before an important presentation. A minute later, Sergei Nikolaevich introduced the members of the expert commission, and the work began. Natasha was the third to present. She spoke clearly and to the point, without unnecessary words, and presented her vision for the work of the new department. Then she answered questions just as thoroughly and only felt a tremor of nervousness after she sat down. "Well done, Natasha. You should have seen the commission's faces. They hung on your every word. I admit my defeat right now, but I hope you'll take me onto your team." "Don't say that, Gob, until the results are announced," Natasha replied. A break was announced. The men went for a smoke, and the friends, to relieve the tension, began to discuss the upcoming wedding. "When are we going dress shopping? There are only 2 weeks left," Yulia asked. "Let's have a bachelorette party on Saturday, stroll through the shops, then sit in a cafe somewhere and chat, because we haven't had time to talk lately." "And won't Timur mind?" "Of course not. He's not one of those men who cling to the canons of Domostroy." Gradually, the conference room began to fill up again. The expert commission took their seats at the presidium. Sergei Nikolaevich, with a pleased expression, began to announce the discussion results. First, he thanked all the contenders for their creative work, then made a meaningful pause and said, "Natalia Alexandrovna Pavlova is appointed head of the new department." Yulka started hugging her friend and congratulating her on her new position. Natalia smiled shyly and thanked her colleagues who also came to support her. Until the end of the day, she was busy with paperwork, arranging the new office, interviewing colleagues who expressed a desire to move under her leadership. She even forgot to call Timur to tell him about her success and was very surprised when she saw him at the entrance with a bouquet. "I'm sorry, I got completely swamped. And how did you find out I got the position?" she asked, accepting the flowers. "And I always knew I would marry the smartest and most beautiful girl." The last week before the wedding was very intense for Natasha. The new position required full dedication, and she had to stay late at the office. She looked guiltily at Timur when she came home to find dinner waiting for her. "Don't worry, we're a team," he said when Natasha, upset, noticed that she was practically not participating in the wedding preparations. "Everything is under control. Besides, Aunt Sonia has excellent organizational skills." The wedding day turned out to be wonderful. Spring had fully taken hold of the city, enveloping it in a gentle mist of new greenery. The sun reflected in the puddles left from yesterday's downpour. "Are you nervous?" asked Yulia, helping the bride put on her veil. "I'm nervous," Natasha admitted. "Perhaps you were right when you said I was rushing. Everything seems to be going well with Timur, but today there's a kind of anxiety in my soul, as if I've missed something important." "Just typical pre-wedding jitters," Yulia assured her. "But in any case, know that I'm here for you." Throughout the day, events changed like patterns in a kaleidoscope. A solemn registration where the couple exchanged rings, then a traditional photo session, followed by a modest banquet. Natasha struggled to remember the names of guests she had never met before. Everyone smiled and wished the newlyweds happiness. Valentina Ivanovna, Timur's mother, kept somewhat to herself, while her sister, Aunt Sophia, was in charge of everything. She confidently seated guests and directed the waiters. Sophia's face seemed familiar to Natasha, but no matter how hard she tried to remember, she couldn't recall where she had seen the woman. At the end of the celebration, Valentina Ivanovna approached the newlyweds, hugged them in turn, and said, "Now you are one, and everything is common. Both joys and troubles, and what else should become common, Valentina Ivanovna did not say. Live happily." Natasha hugged her mother-in-law. She hoped to feel some warmth, but her heart didn't respond. She looked at Valentina Ivanovna. The woman's face reflected not joy or care, but a vague anxiety. "She's probably worried about her son," Natasha thought, and said aloud, "I will be a good wife to Timur." Valentina Ivanovna's expression hardly changed, only a smile lightly touched the corners of her lips. "We'll see in time," the mother-in-law replied philosophically. The evening was drawing to a close. Yulia, tired from dancing, went into the cool hall and sat down on a sofa behind a ficus. A minute later, she saw Valentina Ivanovna and Sophia. The women didn't notice her and sat down nearby. "Everything is going according to plan," Sophia said cheerfully. "Our boy knows how to make girls fall in love with him. I hope this marriage will be as successful as the previous ones." "On the contrary, I'm anxious. Natasha is a different kind of person and not as naive as them," Valentina Ivanovna replied. "Perhaps everything will work out for them, and Timur will have a real family." "You've probably had too much to drink if you're saying that. All right, we'll discuss everything tomorrow. And now it's time to rejoin the guests." The women got up and headed for the banquet hall, while Yulia remained in the hall. She didn't understand what Valentina Ivanovna and Sophia's words meant, but she felt that the women were planning something against Natasha. Yulia didn't tell her friend about the overheard conversation that evening. Why spoil the celebration with her suspicions? Maybe she hadn't heard something correctly, but she couldn't forget what she had heard. After the wedding, Timur started talking about a trip, but Natasha wasn't happy. "Darling, now is probably not the best time. I've just started my duties and simply can't drop everything. You yourself insisted that I not refuse the position. Perhaps by autumn the department will be working stably and I can take a vacation. Yes, of course. I just wanted to make you happy. Timur was looking for an excuse to talk about the inherited seaside cottage, but Natasha seemed to have forgotten about it and lived for her work. A phone call helped. Natasha saw an unknown number and was about to reject the call, but then she answered it anyway. Natashechka. A voice came from the receiver. It's Emma Dmitrievna, your neighbor. I'm still waiting for you to call. What have you decided about your house? People are already booking for the summer months. I'm fully booked until September. Zinochka's regular clients are calling now, and I don't know what to tell them. You should come for at least a week. We could discuss everything. I could accommodate guests, and we'd hire someone for cleaning. There are always plenty of people willing to earn money. Emma Dmitrievna, how grateful I am for your call. I'm completely swamped with work right now. I'm afraid I can't come. It probably won't work out this year. That's a shame, replied the neighbor. It's easier and more reliable to work with regular vacationers. Try to get away for at least a few days. All right, I'll think about it, Natasha replied, without much hope. Timur followed the conversation attentively, pretending to be completely absorbed in the news feed he was scrolling through. He couldn't have expected such good luck. Who was that? He asked with feigned indifference. Emma Dmitrievna, Aunt Zina's neighbor, is worried the house will stand empty. I promised her I'd come when Yulia and I were there, but now I can't. So, we'll have to skip this season. Or maybe we should sell the cottage. Although it's a shame, it's a good house, a beautiful location, and it's a 5-minute walk to the sea. And what kind of house is it? You mentioned an inheritance, though you didn't tell me anything in detail, Timur asked. The man was being cunning. He knew everything perfectly well about the house, the plot of land, and the value of similar cottages on the second coastline. He had even studied all the photographs. In fact, it was for the sake of this house that the spontaneous acquaintance and hurried wedding were initiated. Natasha told her husband in detail about her visit to the notary, the letter from her aunt, and her trip. Timur pretended to think and then said, Your neighbor is right. Leaving the house unattended during the season is dangerous, but it's also not advisable for you to give up your position, especially since such prospects have opened up for you now. Perhaps I could try to arrange something at work and handle this myself. You would issue a power of attorney, and I would handle all the paperwork for renting out the cottage, hire maids, and tidy up the yard. Of course, I don't want to leave you, but the problem needs to be solved somehow. You can really do it all for me? Natasha asked joyfully. That would be wonderful. Timur hesitated, though his heart leaped with joy that he didn't have to make any effort. The house was practically falling into his hands. Natasha, I've only suggested this theoretically. You understand that I have a job too. Tomorrow I'll talk to my boss, and if he agrees, we'll handle the documents. That night, Natasha woke up with a terrible thirst. She usually kept a bottle of water on her nightstand. But tonight, she'd probably forgotten. She was surprised that Timur wasn't beside her and saw a thin sliver of light peeking through the crack in the door. She found her husband in the kitchen. He was talking on the phone with someone, but as soon as he noticed her, he immediately hung up. Who called so late? Natasha asked. Mom, something happened with her lock. She asked me to come over tomorrow morning, or she wouldn't even be able to go outside. To prove it, he casually placed his phone screen up. The last contact was indeed Valentina Ivanovna's phone number. At breakfast, Timur asked, So, do you really want me to help you organize the rental of the cottage? Of course, as long as it doesn't interfere with your work, Natasha replied. Then I'll stop by my mom's in the morning, and then I'll go to work to arrange for leave. But Natasha probably had a very strong guardian angel who protected her from evil. On the way to his mother's, where Timur was actually going to meet his aunt, he felt a sharp pain in his right side. A dull discomfort had been bothering him for about 3 days, but he tried to ignore it. As the man climbed the stairs, the pain intensified. He broke out in a cold sweat. My God, what's wrong with you? Valentina Ivanovna recoiled when she saw her son, pale as a sheet. I don't know. My side is hurting, Timur replied and sat down on the floor from another bout. You always have something, diarrhea or dysentery, Sophia said irritably. Take a painkiller, and it will pass. You have to strike while the iron is hot, and I don't recall a time when everything went as smoothly as it is now. You have to seize the moment." Timur followed the advice, took the medicine, and lay down on the sofa. But there was no relief. His mother approached him and touched his forehead. "Sonia, this isn't just something he ate. He has a fever. We need to call an ambulance," Valentina Ivanovna said, worried. "Why are you fussing over him like a child? Is he a man or not? I'm giving you everything on a silver platter, and you always have some problems." "Fine. Call an ambulance. Let them take a look. Maybe there's nothing serious." Natalia sat at her desk in her spacious office, preparing documents for a contract with the city administration with Yulia. Suddenly, Natasha's phone vibrated. "Valentina Ivanovna," she read and shrugged in bewilderment. Her mother-in-law had never called her during working hours. "Natashechka," she heard a worried voice. "Timurchik is in the hospital. They're preparing him for surgery." "What happened?" she said worriedly. "Timur had an accident." "No, the doctor says his appendix ruptured. Peritonitis has started to develop. What hospital is he in?" "I'll be right there," Natalia said and started packing her bag. Yulia, who had heard the entire conversation, tried to comfort her friend. "Everything will be all right. People don't die from appendicitis anymore. A week and he'll be as good as new." Natasha didn't risk driving. Her hands trembled as if from a severe chill. She called a taxi and, while waiting, paced endlessly by the steps leading to the office building. Then she urged the driver on, though he was already driving at the maximum allowed speed. In the corridor of the surgical department, the girl saw Valentina Ivanovna, who, in her agitation, was crumpling the edge of the robe draped over her shoulders. "He's already been taken to the operating room. They said we have to wait at least 2 hours," the mother-in-law said. Natalia sat down next to her. "Was he planning to go somewhere?" asked Valentina Ivanovna. "He said he had some documents to get notarized." "Yes, but that's not important right now. Everything can wait." The clock seemed to have stopped. Natasha felt as if everything was happening in slow motion. Even the sounds seemed to come from under layers of water. She saw a gurney being brought out of the elevator on which Timur was lying. She hurried towards her husband, but a nurse stopped her. "The patient will be in intensive care for a while. Visitors are not allowed there." Natasha noticed the doctor approaching her mother-in-law and heading towards them. Don't be frightened by the word intensive care. After peritonitis, it's standard procedure. Go home now. In the morning, he'll be moved to a regular room. Then you're welcome to visit. "So the operation was successful," Natalia clarified. "Fortunately, we were in time, but if you had continued self-treatment and taken painkillers for another couple of hours, the outcome would have been more dire." For the next few days, Natalia was torn between the hospital and work. She woke up at 5 o'clock, prepared broths and pureed soups, drove to Timur, then hurried to the office. In the evening, she was with her husband again, and at night she prepared presentations and drafted contract proposals. Yulia took on a large part of the responsibilities to help her friend in any way she could. After 4 days, Natasha felt like she was operating on autopilot, as her consciousness, from fatigue and lack of sleep, refused to delve into details. In the morning, she habitually knocked on the ward door and had already reached the middle of the room when she realized she had made a mistake. Instead of her husband, an elderly woman was lying by the window, and a peacefully sleeping teenage girl was in the other bed. She was about to turn to leave when she heard a weak voice. "Sister, please hand me the water bottle. My head is spinning and my legs aren't holding me." Natasha realized she'd been mistaken for a nurse, but she fulfilled the request. "Oh, I'm so sorry," the old woman said when she came closer. "I thought Lyudochka, our nurse, had come in." "It's nothing," Natalia replied. "I accidentally opened the wrong door. My husband is here after surgery." "And why are you so early? The rounds haven't even started yet?" the woman asked, and Natasha suddenly felt her loneliness, that she wanted to exchange a few words with a visitor. "I stop by before work, bring him food, and then stop by after work," Natasha replied. "What a good girl. You understand that a hospital isn't a resort, that everyone here has their own problems, and there's no one to talk to. My name is Raisa Semyonovna, and what's yours?" Natalia introduced herself, offered a few comforting words, and excused herself. The morning conversation replayed in her head all day. She didn't usually notice excessive compassion in herself, but this old woman wouldn't leave her memory. When she was buying yogurts and juices for Timur that evening, she decided to do something nice for her new acquaintance. She packed the treats into a separate bag. Probably no one visits her. I'll cheer her up a little. And then, during each of her visits, she tried to look in on Raisa Semyonovna for at least a short while. Timur was recovering quickly. He could already walk the corridor, holding his side, and often met his wife at the door. "Ah, I let you down," he lamented. "I promised to take care of the house, but instead, I ended up in the hospital. The house isn't going anywhere, and the sea will remain in place. The main thing is that everything goes without complications," Natasha replied. Her mother-in-law, present at this conversation, unexpectedly suggested, "Perhaps we should call a notary to the hospital so that the documents are ready for discharge?" Natalia was surprised. Why? Timur alone won't go anywhere, so the documents aren't needed. "I can accompany him, and I'll visit the sea at the same time." "I don't think that's a good idea. It will be difficult for Timur to spend so many hours on a train." Her mother-in-law's persistence made Natasha a little wary, but she immediately found an excuse. She just wants to help her son. A few days later, Natasha, as usual, arrived at the hospital early in the morning. To her great surprise, she saw Raisa Semyonovna sitting on a chair by the door, who whispered in an agitated tone, "Don't rush. Come to my ward. There's an important conversation." What important conversation could there be? Natasha thought and wanted to refuse, citing that she had to rush to work, but the old woman had already grabbed her hand with a death grip and led her to the open door. She sat her guest down next to her and said, "Don't think I've lost my mind. The conversation is indeed serious. I've lived on this earth for a long time, seen a lot, and I can see right through people. Your husband is not who he claims to be, and he doesn't love you. You run to him with all your heart twice a day, and as soon as he gets stronger, he flirts with young nurses. But that's not the main thing. I would have kept quiet about such trifles and wouldn't have interfered in your family. I've noticed for a long time, his mother, your mother-in-law, comes to visit him. They sit in a corner and whisper. All you can hear is house, sea, power of attorney, millions. Is it possible this is about your house?" Natasha shrugged. "Maybe it is. Timur was supposed to go to sign the documents for renting to vacationers, but he ended up in the hospital, and I got a promotion at work and can't drop everything now, so they're worried. Wait, I haven't told you the most important thing. Yesterday, another woman came to see him, a loud one with a commanding voice, though they tried not to speak loudly, but can a Jericho trumpet be silenced? Anyway, she wasn't whispering like your mother-in-law, but demanding that your husband force you to sign a power of attorney, and what she'd put in it would be her business, and then the house would have to be sold urgently, but in such a way that you wouldn't even suspect. She's already developed a plan. This I didn't quite understand. They were talking about some kind of postponement, that you could still use this house for a whole year, that you wouldn't even know it didn't belong to you, and then they would present the documents and divorce you. Yes, and I just remembered. Your husband called her Aunt Sonia, and when she left, she said strictly, 40 million is no joke. Do whatever you have to, but make her come to the office and sign the documents. Then I'll take care of everything. I'll send him to my friend. Run away from him immediately, my dear girl." Natalia couldn't believe Raisa Semyonovna's story. She had revealed too many details that no one knew, but she didn't act rashly either. She went into her husband's ward as if nothing had happened. "And I have good news," Timur said. "The doctor says I'll be discharged in a couple of days, and that I can travel not only by train in a brace, but also fly to the moon. Perhaps Mom is right. We'll need to go to the office and get a power of attorney." The puzzle pieces clicked into place, and Natalia realized that Yulia had been right. Well, they decided that we are the smartest. Now we'll play by my rules, Natasha thought, and said, "All right, we'll do it right after you're discharged." And here, Natasha remembered where she had seen Aunt Sophia. Of course, it was that same secretary who, when she was leaving the notary, had said to someone on the phone, "Yes, she's leaving now, be on alert." "What happened?" asked Yulia when Natasha entered the office. Natasha haltingly recounted Timur's late-night conversation, Raisa Semyonovna's suspicions, Aunt Sophia, and Timur's insistent desire to get the power of attorney as soon as possible. "I just don't have any proof." "Perhaps these are just some coincidences." Natasha tried to find an excuse. "You'll get proof," Yulia replied. "When is Timur being released from the hospital?" "They promised in 3 days. So, we'll have time to prepare. Just don't agree to have a notary called to the hospital." By evening, Yulia, like a seasoned detective, had a plan of action. The girls were sitting in Natasha's apartment, poring over social media. They were searching for the pages of Timur's wives, the ones he had mentioned. 2 hours later, they were already sending messages to the women, asking them to get in touch. Tatiana responded first. Upon learning that it was about her ex-husband, she immediately agreed to a meeting. "Could you come over right now? This is urgent. We'll pay for the taxi," Yulia said, not wanting to delay. Tanya hesitated for a moment, but the resentment and anger that hadn't yet subsided in her heart took over. "Give me the address. It seems we've found ourselves in the same boat." Natasha watched her friend, amazed by the speed of her actions. "You probably chose the wrong profession. You should have opened a detective agency." "Someone has to think for you, otherwise your new relatives will quickly take advantage of you," Yulia responded. Tatiana rang Natasha's doorbell half an hour later. "You probably fell for this family's scheme too?" the guest asked. "Did you sign the power of attorney for the real estate yet?" "No," Natasha answered, "but Timur, with his mother and aunt, really wants to get a power of attorney for my house." "And did you inherit the house, which was registered through a personal lawyer's office?" Tatiana asked. Natasha nodded, and the guest continued. "Perhaps we even got married according to the same scenario. A chance encounter on the street, romantic dates, a hasty wedding, and then renovations or selling the apartment. And such a sweet offer to shield you from all the hassle, but for that, you need to sign a power of attorney." "Exactly, with a few minor differences," Natasha confirmed. "And why did you get divorced?" "Don't you understand yet? Timur doesn't marry women. He marries their real estate. The renovation was indeed done. He pretended to be a loving husband for over a year. I never even suspected I was living in someone else's apartment. It had already been sold, then gifted. Anyway, one day Timur said we needed to get a divorce. I cried, of course, but I accepted it. 2 months after the divorce, a respectable-looking man knocked on my door and told me that the lease had expired and I had to move out. I tried to explain that it was some mistake, but the man showed me the documents. I got scared and called the local police officer. Anyway, I won't describe the whole saga. I still wake up in a cold sweat at night when I dream of that nightmare. The man didn't make a fuss. He calmly waited on the landing for the law enforcement officer. The officer checked his documents and asked to see mine. Confidently, I brought the folder and, without even looking at the contents, handed it to the lieutenant. "Everything is in order. You have a copy of the lease agreement. The term has expired. The apartment owner is legally requesting you to vacate," he said. I thought the divorce from Timur was the worst thing that could have happened to me, but the real hell was just beginning. The court recognized all the transactions as legally valid. I tried to appeal the decision, but without success. "Did you meet with Timur's first wife?" Yulia asked. "I did. I wanted us to file a lawsuit together to prove fraud, but she refused. Unfortunately, after the divorce, she had to undergo almost a year of treatment for severe apathy, and she didn't have the strength to go through it all again. By the way, I still have her contact information." The girls discussed what had happened for a long time, deciding how to proceed. Of course, Natasha could have simply filed for divorce and forgotten Timur like a bad dream, but she felt so sorry for his deceived wives that she followed Yulia's advice and decided to help Tatiana expose him. After Tatiana filed a fraud complaint citing newly discovered circumstances, Timur's activities finally attracted official attention. The plan to catch all the involved parties red-handed was surprisingly simple, and Natasha played the main role. She continued to visit the hospital twice a day with homemade food, solicitously supported her husband during his walks in the corridor, and discussed their future trip with him. "I'll probably have to stay there for a few weeks to sort out all the paperwork. Maybe I should really take Emma Dmitrievna's offer and let out some vacationers," he asked. Natasha probably deserved an Oscar for her leading role if her experiences were the plot of a movie, but this was real life, and the young woman had to make immense efforts to smile calmly and pretend she knew nothing about her husband's treacherous plan. "Of course, Timur," she agreed. "I'm happy that you're supporting me now, and your mother hasn't stayed out of it either. She even agreed to go with me. By the way, I've made an appointment with a notary for Friday. We'll stop by right after you're discharged." "And which notary?" Timur asked, alarmed. "Of course, the personal lawyer's office, since this firm already means so much in our lives." Aunt Sonia recommended not the one who handled the inheritance, but a more experienced woman. Timur breathed a sigh of relief. He began to vividly describe how he would turn the cottage into a real guest house, and then, if things went well, they could sell their apartments and invest in seaside property. He thought about how lucky he was to marry an orphan. "Yes, my aunt has a real knack for this. Getting such a juicy morsel without any hassle is real luck," he thought, not doubting for a moment that the seaside house was already in his pocket. Although the investigator had clearly briefed Natasha, she was very nervous on Friday morning. She was already expected at the hospital. "I've decided to go with you to the notary, too, in case anything is needed, although Sonia has already taken care of everything." "Yes," she suggested who would be best to contact. "I didn't even recognize her at the wedding. It's funny, what a coincidence. I received my inheritance without any trouble, met Timur that very day, and now she's helping," Natasha said with a smile. Valentina Ivanovna sensed some sort of trick in her daughter-in-law's words, but glancing at Natasha's serene face, she calmed down. Indeed, what strange coincidences happen in life. Timur and Valentina Ivanovna entered the notary's office anticipating wealth. They didn't even notice two young women sitting discreetly at the end of the corridor, observing them. "Here you are," Sophia beamed. "Natasha, you were very clever to book your appointment in advance. See what a rush of clients there is today. I may be a small fry here, but I've already checked everything out of kinship, so you can confidently sign the documents. Your husband is a saint. He's sick himself, and look how he cares for you. He's going to fix things after surgery, and your mother-in-law is like a mother to you." Natasha nodded silently, looking at this carnival of hypocrisy. At that moment, a client exited the notary's office, and Sophia led Timur and Natasha in. The notary began to follow protocol. She checked the documents and only then smiled. Everything is by the book, although what is there to check? Sophia Ivanovna warned that her relatives would come. She opened the folder and handed over the powers of attorney. Natasha signed the first sheet without reading it, then took the second copy and lingered on it. "But you are signing, Natalia Alexandrovna. This is an exact copy," the woman said anxiously. Suddenly, two men entered the office, their appearance and demeanor leaving no doubt about their department. The notary first jumped out of her chair and then sank back into it like a deflated balloon settling on the ground. "Please invite witnesses," one of them said to Sophia Ivanovna with exaggerated politeness. The woman understood that the show was over. She looked at Natasha with hatred and whispered, "If I had known, I would have crushed you myself." The seized documents confirmed that Natasha was supposed to sign two different powers of attorney, one granting the right to submit documents to the tax office and conclude lease agreements, and the other granting the right to perform any actions with the specified property, including sale and donation. Timur initially feigned complete confusion about what was happening, then put on a ballet performance of a dying swan. When he saw Tatiana and Elena in the office, he realized the audience wouldn't appreciate his talent, and, resignedly slumping into a chair, he spoke in a falsetto, "I request that it be entered into the record that I acted under duress, that I was under the influence of medication prescribed to me in the hospital after surgery." Valentina Ivanovna, on the other hand, declared that she was merely accompanying her ailing son and knew nothing about any documents. Traitors, Sofia Ivanovna hissed loudly, realizing that the main burden of responsibility would fall on her. After the incident, a case against the organized criminal group, which included Timur, was finally opened, and Tatiana and Elena had hope of receiving some compensation. Timur, who was released pending trial on his own recognizance, sought to meet with Natasha. He wrote her long messages, the essence of which was that he had indeed initially agreed to participate in his relative's schemes. But then he had fallen in love with her with all his heart and decided to abandon the criminal path, but he received no response. One August evening, Yulia and Natasha were sitting on the veranda of the cottage. They had finally managed to go on vacation together. "It's hard to believe so much has happened. Just half a year, and it feels like a whole life," Natasha said. "Are you sure you won't regret this?" Yulia asked when she learned that Natasha had decided to leave her job and move to the seaside. "What about your department, your career?" "I'm leaving the department in good hands," she replied, giving her friend a meaningful look. "And career? In any case, I'll have to put it on hold." Natasha gently stroked her slightly rounded belly and smiled dreamily. Her eyes held an expression that could be seen in images of the Madonna and Child. "Is it what I'm thinking?" Yulia asked and received an affirmative answer. "Is it Timur's child?" she clarified. "No, it's my child," Natasha replied. "And Timur doesn't need to know about it. At least he has other plans for the next 5 years." Yulia was only able to visit her friend the following summer. She barely recognized the courtyard that her aunt had left to Natasha. Everything spoke of a skilled male hand and exquisite taste of the owners. In the small space, there was a fountain with a pool where goldfish swam, a children's playground, and a rock garden. And on the neighboring plot, a grandiose construction was underway. The walls, built up to the 3rd-story level, clearly bore the features of a real castle. Seeing the taxi stop, Natasha hurried to meet her friend. The girls hugged. "And where is your strong man?" Yulia asked. "Seryojenka, he's with his father, dealing with his manly affairs." Yulia stopped in bewilderment. "Timur wasn't jailed and you took him back?" she asked with disappointment. "Timur? No, that shadow from the past no longer troubles me, not even in my nightmares. Seryojenka has a real father." At that moment, a tanned man emerged onto the porch, holding a laughing baby. "Finally, I'll get to meet the legendary Yulia," he said. "My wife has told me so much about you that it feels like we've lived together for a long time, and Natasha will now have to fulfill her promise to me." Yulia froze, unsure how to act. She and Natasha had talked on the phone almost every day, and her friend had never mentioned getting married. "And you hid from me that you got married?" she asked. "You didn't even invite me to the wedding." "Not at all. I can't take such a responsible step without your well-being." Only in the evening, after the man carried the sleeping Seryoja into the house, did Natasha tell her friend about the changes in her life. Ivan had bought the neighboring plot almost simultaneously with her arrival. He had come over to visit and apologized for the noise that would be coming from his yard for some time. Construction would begin the following week. Then, from time to time, he would drop by Natasha's for tea, and observing the changes in her figure, wouldn't pry into her soul but would silently try to help her with household chores. "You should look at your neighbor, Natasha. He's pining for you, just too afraid to say it," Emma Dmitrievna told her, "and he'll accept your child as his own. You see how he takes care of you, even though you give him no hint of hope." "Oh, Emma Dmitrievna, what kind of pregnant bride am I?" Natasha laughed. "And neither my son nor I need anyone. I've been burned by milk, so now I'll blow on water." There was a week left until the due date. Natasha once again checked her hospital bag and documents and decided to go to the perinatal center the next day, just in case, since she lived alone. But the just in case happened that very night. Although Natasha had considered this possibility in her thoughts and had a clear action plan, she became flustered and scared. Emma Dmitrievna, seeing the light on in her neighbor's rooms at an unusual hour, hurried over. Natasha, barely able to overcome the pain, tried to dial emergency services. "But you're already giving birth," the woman exclaimed, noticing the wet tracks Natasha was leaving. "I'll be right there, dear, in a moment." A minute later, she was knocking on Ivan's door. "Quickly, get the car out. We'll meet the ambulance," she shouted and ran back. But upon returning to Natasha, Emma Dmitrievna realized that she would have to help the baby arrive right here and now. Ivan arrived with the news that everything was ready, just as Seryojenko loudly announced his arrival into the world. What followed remained in the man's memory like a dream. He heard the siren of the car and quickly went out to meet the doctors, leading them into the house. Then the elderly paramedic addressed him. "Well, Daddy, here's your son." And for a moment he placed a swaddled baby into his hands. Ivan felt as if his heart had stopped, and he felt that he was holding the greatest treasure at that moment. "My God, what clumsy weaklings men are," the paramedic said, taking the baby back. Instead of thanking his wife, congratulating her, he just stands there like a statue. Good thing he hasn't lost consciousness. Others actually faint at such moments. Natasha was placed on a stretcher and carried to the car. "I'll go with you," Ivan said, unexpectedly to himself. "Well then, take the air." The paramedic handed the baby to him. The 20 minutes it took to drive to the perinatal center decided everything. Ivan understood that this little person, who had just arrived, had determined his future. Yulia was silent for a moment. "You know, my friend, you're a living prototype for all those melodramas. They could make a movie about you right now, but you'll have a significant role in this film too," Natasha laughed. "Get ready to be both a witness at the wedding and the godmother to our Seryojenko."